Imagine this. Your song wins an Oscar. It hits #1 around the world. It becomes one of the most iconic movie themes of all time, and it destroys your band. This is the true story of Take My Breath Away and the band that never recovered from its success. Welcome back to Track's Backstory, where we uncover the fascinating stories behind the music you love. In 1986, a song called Take My Breath Away became forever linked to fighter jets, Tom Cruise, and one of the biggest movies of the decade. But while the song soared, the band behind it, Berlin, was about to crash and burn. Today, we're diving deep into how a massive hit can sometimes be the worst thing that ever happens to a band. Stay with me until the end, because the real story behind this breakup involves creative betrayal, label pressure, and a lead singer who felt she'd lost her artistic soul. If you love music history and the untold stories behind the hits, make sure you subscribe to Track's Backstory and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let's rewind to the early 1980s. Berlin wasn't some manufactured pop group. They were a legitimate new wave band from Los Angeles with a serious following. Formed in 1978, the band was fronted by the powerful vocalist Terry Nunn, alongside John Crawford on bass and synthesizers, David Diamond on keyboards, Rick Olsen on guitar, Matt Reed on keyboards, and Rod Learned on drums. Their sound was edgy, electronic, and distinctly new wave. Think synthesizers, driving beats, and Terry's dramatic vocals. By 1982, they'd already had a top 40 hit with The Metro, a dark, moody track that showcased everything Berlin was about: attitude, atmosphere, and that unmistakable 80s edge. They weren't trying to be a mainstream pop band. They had an identity, a sound, and a devoted fan base that appreciated their artistic vision. Berlin had even caught the attention of Giorgio Moroder, the legendary Italian producer who had worked with them on their song, No More Words. But here's the thing about the music industry. Success can come from unexpected places, and it doesn't always care about your artistic vision. So how does a cutting-edge new wave band end up recording the theme song for a military action movie? Well, that's where our story takes an interesting turn, and it involves a Ferrari, a mechanic, and one of the most successful producers in music history. In 1985, Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson were producing what they hoped would be a blockbuster, Top Gun. They turned to Giorgio Moroder, the man behind iconic tracks like Donna Summer's I Feel Love and the theme from Flashdance, to create music for the film. Moroder's first assignment was an adrenaline-pumping track for the film's action sequences. That became Danger Zone, which Kenny Loggins recorded to perfection. Bruckheimer was thrilled with the result. But then Bruckheimer came back with another request. They needed a slower, romantic song for the love scenes between Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis. Moroder went to work and crafted an instrumental track with a distinctive synthesized bass sound, a sound he captured in his demo, and that would become signature to the final recording. But he needed lyrics. And this is where the story gets interesting. Enter Tom Whitlock. And this is one of those Hollywood tales that seems almost too perfect to be true. Whitlock was a mechanic who had fixed the brakes on Moroder's Ferrari. During that encounter, he mentioned to Moroder that he wasn't just a mechanic. He was also a lyricist. Moroder, impressed by Whitlock's talent after seeing some of his work, kept him in mind. So when Moroder had this new instrumental track ready, he gave the demo to Whitlock. Here's what happened next. Whitlock wrote the lyrics while driving home from the studio. Then he spent just a few hours at home polishing them. Think about that for a moment. One of the most iconic love songs of the 1980s, an Oscar winner that would be heard by millions, was written during a commute home. The demo, sung by a background singer, was played for director Tony Scott and the producers. They didn't just like it. They loved it so much that they decided to film additional romantic scenes specifically to feature the song. But now they needed the right artist to record the final version. The search for the perfect voice would take some unexpected turns before landing on Berlin, and when it did, it would change everything. Here's something most people don't know. Berlin wasn't the first choice to record Take My Breath Away. The song was first offered to the Motels, another respected new wave band. They recorded a demo that was quite similar to what Berlin would eventually release. In fact, you can hear the Motels' original version on their 2001 compilation album Anthology Land, a fascinating glimpse into what might have been. But for whatever reason, the Motels passed on the opportunity, Columbia Records then started suggesting their own signed artists. Alison Moyet, the powerful vocalist behind hits like Invisible, was among those considered. But ultimately, Giorgio Moroder had a different idea. He remembered Berlin. He'd produced their song No More Words and had been impressed by Terry Nunn's voice, that distinctive dramatic quality that could convey both strength and vulnerability. Moroder reached out, and Columbia Records agreed. Before recording, Tom Whitlock made a few refinements to the lyrics. Then Terry Nunn stepped into the studio. Now, here's where the story gets complicated. According to various accounts, this wasn't presented as a full Berlin band project. This was Terry recording a vocal for a movie soundtrack, essentially a solo opportunity that would be credited to Berlin. Terry laid down the vocals, and the result was magic. Her voice had exactly the cinematic quality the song needed. Breathy and romantic, powerful when it needed to be, vulnerable in all the right moments. Years later, Giorgio Moroder would say something remarkable. Of all the songs he produced in his legendary career, and we're talking about a man who shaped the sound of disco, won multiple Oscars, and worked with some of the biggest names in music. Take My Breath Away was the one he was most proud of. But here's the irony. While Moroder considered it his crowning achievement, the rest of Berlin would come to see it as something quite different. When the band heard the finished track, reactions were mixed at best. This wasn't the Berlin they knew. It was smooth, polished, romantic, absolutely nothing like the Metro or their other edgier material. Some members felt it compromised everything they'd built their reputation on, but the label saw dollar signs, and they weren't wrong. When Top Gun hit theaters in May 1986, everything changed, not just for the movie, but for everyone associated with it. Take My Breath Away didn't just become a hit, it became a phenomenon. The song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in September 1986. But that was just the beginning. It topped charts in the UK, Canada, Ireland, and the Netherlands. It went top 5 in over a dozen countries. The Top Gun soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of the year. In March 1987, Take My Breath Away won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. It also won a Golden Globe. Berlin, a new wave band from Los Angeles, now had an Oscar winner on their resume. For most artists, this would be the dream scenario. Your song is everywhere. It's on every radio station. It's winning major awards. You're famous. But here's the cruel irony. The song that made Berlin internationally famous was also tearing them apart. See, while Terry Nunn was being celebrated as the voice of this romantic anthem, the rest of the band felt increasingly sidelined. The song was credited to Berlin, but it wasn't really a Berlin song, not in the way their fans understood what Berlin was about. John Crawford, the band's bassist and primary songwriter, later described feeling like the band's identity had been hijacked. They'd spent years building a sound, a reputation, and a creative vision, and now they were known for a song that, in his view, represented everything they'd been trying not to be. Now, let's talk about how this success story turned into a breakup story. After Take My Breath Away became a global smash, the pressure was on. Columbia Records wanted another hit just like it. They wanted Berlin to become a pop ballad band, the kind that could churn out movie themes and soft rock radio hits. But that's not what John Crawford and the other band members wanted. They wanted to return to their new wave roots, to make music that felt authentic to who they were as artists. Terry Nunn was caught in the middle. She'd sung the song that changed everything, and now she was the face of Berlin's new direction, whether she wanted to be or not. The tensions became impossible to ignore. Creative disagreements turned into arguments. Arguments turned into resentment. And by 1987, just as Take My Breath Away was winning its Oscar, Berlin was falling apart. In interviews years later, band members would describe the experience differently. Terry has said she felt proud of the song and the success it brought, even if it wasn't typical Berlin material. John Crawford has been more critical, describing it as a commercial compromise that cost the band its soul. The sad truth is, they were both right. Take My Breath Away was an incredible achievement, a beautifully crafted song that millions of people connected with, but it also represented a fundamental conflict over what Berlin was supposed to be. And here's the kicker. Berlin officially disbanded in 1987, just 1 year after their biggest success. The song that should have launched them to new heights instead became their swan song. Now, that's not quite the end of the story, because Take My Breath Away had one more twist in its tail. Berlin would eventually reform in the late 1990s with Terry Nunn back at the helm, and they continue to perform today. But they never recaptured the massive success of Take My Breath Away. The song, meanwhile, took on a life of its own. It's been covered by dozens of artists. It's been featured in countless movies and TV shows. Jessica Simpson even recorded a version for a later Top Gun-related project. The song has become so iconic that it's almost impossible to separate it from the image of Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis in The Sunset. For Terry Nunn, the song remains a complicated legacy. In interviews, she's spoken about how proud she is of the recording, but also how it overshadowed everything else Berlin accomplished. Imagine being in a band for years, creating music you're passionate about, and then being remembered almost exclusively for one song you didn't write, a song written by a mechanic on his drive home from the studio. The story of Take My Breath Away is ultimately a cautionary tale about success in the music industry. Sometimes the thing that makes you famous is the very thing that destroys what made you special in the first place. Sometimes a dream come true can feel like a nightmare if it's not the dream you actually wanted. Berlin wanted to be respected as artists. Take My Breath Away made them famous as the band with that song from Top Gun, and in the end, they couldn't reconcile the two. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Track's Backstory. I hope this gave you a new perspective on a song you've probably heard 1,000 times. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to Track's Backstory and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We've got dozens more stories about the songs that shaped our lives